Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. His name is Joe from the Carolinas. He has a great YouTube channel. Please go check that out, subscribe, hit the bell, make sure you see his updates. But the reason why I wanted to talk to him is kind of get an update. I was included on a Twitter discussion that involved the subject of our last conversation. Our last conversation 3 months ago was about Corey Goode. It was a general discussion about ufology, but centered on Corey Goode and David Wilcock. And within, I think, the last week, it came to the attention of many people within the UFO community that Corey Goode is attempting to trademark the term secret space program. And that really seemed to hit a nerve with a lot of people. So I'm really glad that Joe is taking an hour out of his time to talk about it. But Joe, thanks for being on the show.
It's my pleasure to be back, William. Thank you.
Awesome. So I was in this flurry of Twitters, like included on this, and I my Twitter, I maybe get one tweet a day or something like that, but this was like so much stuff. So maybe what we can do is just talk a little bit about Corey Goode and why this trademark issue really struck a nerve with people who have been in the UFO community for a long time. If you could go into that, please do.
Sure. So for folks that might need to be brought up a little bit to speed, Corey Goode is a alleged secret space program insider who claims to have these kind of communications with these sphere beings and was the Earth's ambassador to different extraterrestrial species. And he was on a show with David Wilcock called Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia TV, both of whom have recently left that show. Subsequent to leaving that program, what ended up happening was word out on the street came down that Corey Goode was actually putting in trademarks or word marks on several of the phrases that were used during the revealing of his particular testimony, if we want to call it that, on his Cosmic Disclosure show. And one of those phrases was SSP. It was actually just 3 letters. And this was extremely controversial because within ufology, the abbreviation SSP, especially with social media where every little character counts, especially with hashtags, everyone in ufology who's into the idea of a classified secret space program realize that this person or trademark might be actually an attempt to, in some ways, restrict free speech and maybe even corner the market on using the phrase or terminology of secret space program, just that letter designation. And the problem with this, of course, is that real, legit secret space program researchers who are looking to find out the truth about what's really going on had followed the logic and recognized that secret space program goes all the way back, even pre-2015, when Corey Goode first appeared on Cosmic Disclosure. Secret space program, the phrase was used in professional conferences in 2015 and 2014 in San Mateo even. And additionally, it's been used in a number of published books that, of course, had copyrights by their publishers dating all the way back to 1991 in one of Bill Hamilton's books. So, and not including but not limited to Bill Hamilton's book. So it really put us into a puzzle as a community because there's been a lot of controversy over Cosmic Disclosure and Corey Goode's testimony to begin with, which I think is a healthy thing to have a debate over these kinds of things. Yet this kind of began uniting the community, even among many of, I think, Corey's supporters. They had a different take on it. It's like, oh no, he's just using that to protect, his t-shirts or whatever they're going to sell with SSP on them. But it does bring in a larger academic kind of issue in terms of citation and claiming credit for, or trying to claim credit for things that did not originate from one's own, creativity.
Right. That's an excellent point. But if he actually was able to trademark that phrase, then you would have to actually pay him if you used it in certain contexts. So there's a financial thing which would actually chill the discussion. And I've got a legal background. I looked into the trademark. There's a stretch. So yeah. Well, the thing is that it's there are notions of specificity. So if you have like a term like three-peat or something that's unique, it's much easier to trademark than something so general. And also it kind of fails the test for that uniqueness if somebody else is using it. So it would be the equivalent of me like coming in and saying, hey, I invented three-peat, you know, if I just started using it 2 years ago, but if somebody else can prove that it's used before. So it actually kind of begs the question, why would that actually be, I think it was a mistake for him to reveal that, because I guess it came to the attention of something, but it would be much more prudent to just do that secretly, get an attorney, not tell anybody, and say, hey, now I have a trademark. So something
Right.
about that was not very clever on his part or anything like that. But yeah, I'd be very interested if he was able to actually successfully trademark that. That would be a surprise to me.
I just think that what's happening, and I really appreciate that, because a lot of us out here in the community have been wondering, well, what is this legit or not? And a lot of us are saying it's not legit. And then others are saying, well, yeah, I mean, the worst case scenario could possibly happen. So it's helpful to be able to talk to you. And I appreciate you reaching out, you know, to help with this, because it's really got the community's plural kind of confused, right? And we are doing the best we can with it.
Yeah, I actually don't think that he'd be able to trademark that if he tried. And I think the attorney, he's working with an attorney. There was also another kind of cease and desist letter that was sent on behalf of Corey to, was it Richard Dolan? I forgot who it was.
No, there was a cease and desist letter that was sent from Corey Goode's, I believe, his intellectual property attorney, to one of the new Gaia Secret Space Program insiders who's actually been interviewed on this channel, named Jason Rice.
Jason Rice, that's right. I saw
Jason
that.
Rice. And this guy kind of came out of nowhere, didn't seem to have any readily identifiable background, shot a bunch of episodes, you know, according to his own report, at least, Gaia TV for Cosmic Disclosure, and then pretty much claims the other day when I interviewed him, he said, I'm not currently under contract with Gaia. We've already shot all the episodes. And so I have signed no non-disclosure agreements or anything.
And
but because
when was that cease and desist letter sent? Do you know? Was it within the last couple months?
It was, I believe, October 3rd, if memory serves correctly.
Okay.
This is a hot trending topic within, you know, the secret space program world.
Well, it's remarkable too. And those cease and desist letters are always kind of intimidation letters. It's really, there's no legally binding thing. You're not obligated, but it does show you that you're on somebody's radar, you know? So if somebody out there in the world gets a cease and desist, it means somebody's irritated enough to get an attorney. But I do think that it's pretty remarkable that he's taking all the good is becoming so fractious within that community. I think that and I've been watching interviews with Richard Dolan and was it Joe Farrell was on.
Joseph Farrell, yeah, we had him on the broadcast too. Yeah, I mean, we're all talking.
Yeah, I highly suggest people check it out. Go to Joe from the Carolinas YouTube channel and look at these interviews, because it kind of shows the kind of seasoned old veterans of this community kind of trying to handle something. And I think there were some interesting statements by Dolan, who really his history of this community is so on point, really sharp guy, but also how either they don't know if they're being infiltrated or if just somebody has come in and said, and I wish I could remember the name, but there's been a couple other concerns about intelligence infiltration or just kind of run-of-the-mill charlatans. So they're trying to contextualize. I feel like there's a lot of contextualization, or trying to contextualize what this person, Corey Goode, and his actions mean. So I do think that's very healthy, you know, just to look in. And there's also a dark journalist. I think his real name is Daniel List or something. Daniel
List, yeah, the dark journalist guy. Yeah,
superb. I mean, I would recommend people listen to his stuff too. But he has used the secret space program terms in his very detailed and lengthy journalistic inquiries into all of this kind of ufology and things like that, to use a broad term. But so that would be another person who would resist, and he's actually publicly resisting. He's in all these Twitter commentaries as well. So, you know, and he does great work too, just like you. So it's really interesting for me to kind of watch this kind of objectively. But do you know? I thought Goode Gaia TV under kind of like there was a fractious leaving from Gaia. Is that correct as well?
I don't know the full story on this, so this is certainly hearsay. My understanding is that when David Wilcock left Gaia, he wrote probably the worst resignation letter any human being could possibly write on the face of the planet in all of human history, because not only did he quit the job, but he accused the Gaia TV, who I don't work for. People allege that because I'm talking about this. But anyway, so he quits his job and writes like this 4-page single-spaced letter, circulates it around on the internet or leaks it. And in the letter, he's accusing Gaia TV of engaging in Luciferian practices, and begins this whole crazy mixed up narrative, which is part of the David Wilcock playbook, which we've talked about before, when we met last.
Right.
And Corey Goode also left Gaia TV at that time. In David Wilcock's resignation letter, he made mention of Corey's pending lawsuit. So there's been this kind of nebulous, well, what is that all about?
Interesting. So there's like a pending lawsuit against Gaia TV from those guys. And
possibly, or I've also heard some rumor that there may be at least one pending lawsuit against Corey Goode, the insider's insider.
So somebody's going to sue him. Oh man, this is just
maybe. These are just things I've heard, and so there's a lot of confusion. But one thing that is concerning for me on a more meta level, on a I guess a 40,000 foot view, is what is happening, what this is doing to the communities, and we have an opportunity here to utilize this trademark incident and what's happening to really bring our communities united, to at least be motivated to figure out what in the heck the truth really is about the subject, as opposed to being feared into being sued.
Right. Interesting.
Right? Because I'm sitting here thinking I've done a lot of SSP titles and a lot of SSP videos. I'm like, they gonna sue me? They're not gonna get anything.
Well, no, but that's like the potential first step is like, this is my trademark. Now you're abusing my trademark. You got to give me a license or mention me in all of your stuff.
Right.
Goods SSP, because he owns the trademark. That's what is on the horizon for those types of legal usages. It lasts for 10 years. So like, you imagine for 10 years having to mention Corey Goode, Corey Goode's secret space program. Yeah.
I tell you, they're if that's how it's going to have to be, then the next logical conclusion for me, William, would be, all right, well, if it's that much of a chore to talk about you, then I guess we just won't talk about you then.
Well, that's it. Then it quells maybe then what he does is it quells and quashes any critical inquiry, right? Because you can't mention that. So then he becomes the top commentator on that subject or something like that. And it's interesting you brought up the whole meta thing, because I was kind of considering like other social groups where they have this, internal battles. So like you could see it within Christendom, politics, these kind of outsiders or somebody. And then like, is he really one of us? Is this like, is Bernie really a Democrat? Is the Mormons really Christian? Is Corey Goode really a ufologist? And how do you deal with that? Like, and I think that the fallout from all this is that he will, the next meeting in the desert or whatever is coming up in 6 months, right? So that'll be interesting too. And I was listening to the Richard Dolan thing. I think he was talking to Jimmy Church, who seems to kind of be wanting on the sidelines, doesn't really want to take a position. But
well, he does though, because he's had Jimmy Church has had David Wilcock and Corey Goode on at least 9 or 10 times since they first, unveiled. Okay, so
I take that back then.
He likes to pretend that he's impartial, but it's fairly obvious that they're really good friends, right? But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's true. Well, the way that he came across in that interview with Dolan was that he was impartial, so I didn't know those additional facts, so I apologize. But those people are going to have to see each other in 6 months at the same trade meeting, the same meeting. So it'll be interesting, the fallout of this. I think and when you kind of look at like intelligence kind of operations where they want, whether even like COINTELPRO, it's like you throw in the apple of discord, like what is it, Khalees, the golden apple, and everybody goes into chaos and freaks out. So I'm not saying this is an intelligence operation, but if somebody was handling this guy, it couldn't be more effective. You know what I mean? To just go.
Oh, sure. And I also don't rule out the possibility that if we just kind of look at it from their points of view, like the point of view that, okay, this is my intellectual property, there could be an effect that happens to the human mind when we overexpose ourselves to this stuff and we begin to cluster in these large groups, and that becomes our existence. So what's the difference between that and a formal psychological operation? Formalized military PSYOP or CIA PSYOP, if we look at the history of MKUltra, those people didn't know that they were being experimented upon. And so psychological operations are really all about behavior control.
Right.
Right? We control the thoughts to control the behaviors. So I also look at this from the same level you are. What's happening to the communities and what's happening within them behaviorally now? Everybody's in chaos.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's true. I think if you really take 2 or 3 steps back and look at it, it's like, wow, this couldn't be more fractious, you know. But yeah, bringing in the intellectual property also brings rise to lawsuits. Like the Scientology copyrighted all of its training manuals and all that stuff, so critics could not even mention them and couldn't bring things up, and it was the groundwork for punitive, like lawsuits from Scientology, which were like slap suits and tried to preclude any comment. That was the way they intimidated critics. So you could see this whole trademark issue as that kind of predicate before the kind of chilling of public discourse happened. So
interesting.
It's really I'm glad, I'm pleased to see so many people sitting up in their chair and going, "Hey, man, this is a problem," because it really is a problem. I don't think that term is really specialized enough to really be copyrighted. I mean, trademarked. So.
Oh, I'm with you. I mean, if you look at Twitter and or if you type into Amazon. Oh, by the way, if you're watching on my channel, there's affiliate links down there. Click them. The SSP is the Space Shuttle Program, according to old NASA books that were published in, I believe, the 1990s or 1980s. Like it says right on the cover, Space Shuttle Program, SSP.
Yeah, so he can't get that acronym. Do you know if his attorney's in Colorado? I think Corey Goode's in Colorado now, right? So is his attorney out of Colorado? Are you aware? Do you know anything about the background?
So from reading Jason Rice's public letter, I believe Corey Goode's attorney is in Texas.
Interesting.
So there's that kind of cross-state line thing, perhaps. But I don't know if that matters with a federal trademark.
No, that's a federal issue. But I think that it's interesting because Goode's from Texas, so he probably got somebody out of that state. Interesting.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, the person who is his attorney, her last name is Llaneros. Well, one person that's been sort of distantly connected to this whole narrative as of late has been somebody who used to actually interview Corey Goode on one occasion to kind of try to settle the community down when a lot of people were questioning the narrative. And, just to be fair, has done some excellent reporting on that particular issue. In that interview is a very good, fair reporter. And so, the thing of it is, do we make anything of that? I don't know. I mean, if you think about it, you have a guy who just left Gaia. He no longer has the protection of Gaia's attorneys, who these guys are sharks,
Well, sure, yeah. I mean,
and so, who do you reach out to?
If they have something that they own, they'll defend its rights and sue you and try to get a monetary judgment. It's just usually the way it goes.
Exactly.
So you're saying Llaneros is his attorney, and then there was that other girl who interviewed him, which I saw when I was researching Goode 3 months ago. So that's a relative of that Llaneros girl. He was also kind of a new ager and wrote a book and stuff like that.
Correct. Yeah, and I mean that book's thick. You know, that was a thick book.
And it was kind of like, it's kind of like, you know, what's those books, like The Promise, or it's kind of has that kind of new agey feel, Marianne Williamson type stuff. You know her?
It was, yeah, it was more like, and I didn't read it, so I can't, you know, speak very much to it, but it was, I believe it was Teresa Naris's kind of life work to put in and create some commentary about magic and how things kind of interconnect, not in a, I guess, summoning and dark way, but just kind of how the universe works from that standpoint. But there are connections. And I think as somebody who is committed to reason, logic, and common sense, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and see conspiracy where there may not be, because I believe that's also intellectually dishonest. But at the same time, why haven't we heard anything publicly on Corey Goode's public YouTube channel, just for him to come out and say, you know, listen, you know, here's what we're doing. Instead, what we get are on his private Facebook group, or maybe even his public Facebook postings, there's this kind of clarification where he'll come out and say, you know what, we're not trying to censor experiencers. They're certainly free to call themselves secret space program experiencers, but you know, we're trying to protect the intellectual property, I think, of a brand. You know, and I didn't realize Disclosure was the brand.
What is so Cosmic Disclosure is the brand. Secret Space Program is some kind of subset of Cosmic Disclosure from Gaia. I would think that Gaia actually probably owns the title Cosmic Disclosure. So I
would think so too.
Unless there was some kind of internal agreement that we don't know. But yeah, I mean, I would be hard pressed. I mean, usually these guys, if they switch between different networks, they have to change things. You know, they got to do something different. Usually when you sign up with those networks, you sign away your life. You sign away your future. Typically, you sign away in all the intellectual property and a lot of the rights to that, usually for money. But yeah, I mean, I've looked at those standard entertainment agreements. They favor the network almost all the time. So I'd be interested to see if he ends up with Cosmic Disclosure. When we talked last time, another name that popped up, which you had told me information about, and I did not know about, was Jordan Sather.
Oh yeah,
kind of like a big kind of, you know, alternate information person who's been bandied around, but he seems to have taken the side of Wilcock and Good. And you know, there's a lot of talk on Twitter about him too. Like, why don't you just, you know, come clean? But maybe you know more about that.
Well, there's been a lot of people that have been noticing some difficulties with the way that Jordan Sather chooses to interact with members of the communities, plural, concerning this subject matter, not only of the trademark issue, but also just in a general way of just interacting in a very respectful way to people that criticize or disagree with Corey Goode's narrative. And Jordan Sather has gone to the point where he has named myself, Unirock, Dark Journalist, C.W. Chanter, a number of other people, and Cliff High, Walter Bosley, I believe, and a number of others that I'm blanking on at the moment, but I apologize if I am. And we're the shill list. And then we're also called the Dark Alliance.
Right. So that was something that he used, that Good used in the past, that you're the kind of antithesis, the enemy, right? So now you're in the Dark Alliance. Wow.
That's correct. And in the past, when that Dark Alliance thing was going around, there were people, including but not limited to Groovy Bean here on YouTube, who's been on C.W. Chanter's broadcast, talking about the torment that some people began putting her through, some fans or whatever, and maybe others. They began putting her through real gang stalking type torment because she was coming out against the story and, you know, some of the details of what she experienced. And, you know, myself, I also got some death threats, and it's kind of interesting.
That's the death threat's very serious.
Yeah, serious business.
That was recent on Twitter.
So the most recent death threats happened when I started creating critical thinking videos meta level about QAnon.
Gotcha.
Okay. And Jordan Sather has been reporting QAnon like, it's just going to be an infinite phenomenon.
Right. And I mean, that's a big hot topic too. So he's kind of picked his spot, right?
That's right. So he's into Q, and he was also and is into Corey Goode, the Insider's Insider. Well, listen, if he's going to come out and make shill lists and say that people are lying and engaging in misinformation, disinformation, and are projecting to him, I very calmly asked Jordan Sather as well as Unirock and CW Chanter, and this one's a barn burner, William. Let me tell you. I said, listen, can we have a calm, reasonable, rational conversation on a live stream to sort this thing out where we're not doing any name calling? And Unirock had proposed the same thing just in the past 24 hours. And then shortly after that, last night, CW Chanter said that he was willing to do a 2-hour calm debate using a moderator of Jordan Sather's choosing, and he will be putting up $1,000 of his own money to a charity of Jordan Sather's choosing to do a formal debate. Now, I don't know how much more polite and respectful and yet academically and intellectually honest you can be. And so what's happening is this secret space program TM thing has actually created a rift in the community to try to get some sense of integrity and standards back into this field that has just gone way off into outer space, so far that not even the most highest powered telescope can see that far.
Was there a response by Sather to that offer by CW Chanter?
Not to my knowledge, but
so it's just hard. A standing offer. That's a fair offer. I would think that if he wanted to maintain his credibility, he would accept that offer and at least talk for an hour or two. I
would think so. But I accept that having extended an olive branch to Jordan Sather and not getting a response or just getting whatever hate back, which is kind of interesting.
And when people use that term, that's a little questionable anyway. But it seems like, when we talked 3 months ago, we talked about this kind of cult-like, non-questioning behavior that surrounds, seems to surround Goode. And have you seen that kind of still continuing even through this trademark issue?
To be perfectly honest with you, even though part of me is like, in the past I've talked about this, that's all been very quiet lately. It's kind of weird. Things are very, very quiet in terms of the groupings of things. I don't know that they have any mass events. I believe they have an 11/11 mass meditation, but that is not something that is connected specifically to Corey Goode. Like in the New Age communities, they have all kinds of mass meditations at different events. So the way that I think we could connect any of that to Mr. Goode would just be through his YouTube channel, the Sphere Being Alliance, and also Sphere Being Alliance Facebook page. And that's the group that has been accused in the past of engaging in some sort of cult-like behavior or following.
How would you assess the size of his reach? Does he have just a small core audience? Because when I was listening to the Jimmy Church, Richard Dolan interview, it seemed like they were talking about how at some of these conferences there would be marked discrepancy in the amount of people who are going to certain venues to listen to somebody. And the way they described it was that Corey Goode was really drawing a lot of crowds. So do you know anything about that?
The only thing I know, just because I was involved in restreaming from another YouTuber whose name is Positive Momentum. So I was restreaming. He was live at Disclosure Fest this past summer, streaming And you hear David Wilcock and Corey Goode, the insiders on the stage, and then Emery, the E.T. Butcher Smith, was on the stage, and they were doing their little dance and talking about aliens. And
Emery, just for
Wilcock,
people who don't know, Emery Smith has supposedly done like 60 autopsies on aliens. Is that right?
I'm not sure if the numbers changed from 300 to 3,000.
Okay, I didn't know.
And they weren't full body autopsies. They were actually little pieces, just little pieces. I kind of wonder how that all works, but anyway, so when Positive Momentum was streaming, you hear David Wilcock, and we see this on video, say, yeah, we've got thousands upon thousands of people here. And he panned his phone or camera around, and there might have been 100, maybe 200.
Interesting.
So there's that influencing.
Right. So I just wonder about the totality of his reach. I know that, I think we talked about this last night. Somebody paid $9,000 to move Goode from Texas to Boulder, Colorado, or something like that. So that's a substantial amount of money. Did you ever hear that?
I have. I've heard that. I'm not clear who it was exactly. All I heard was his followers.
Gotcha.
So, for all I know, it could have been Gaia TV, right?
And I'm not sure why Unirock or Chanter's also involved in this kind of this situation. Were they also critics of Goode?
Yes. So C.W. Chanter came out in about 2015, shortly after he created his YouTube channel, and began discussing the inherent logical problems with Corey Goode's story, which I think, the guy being a lawyer, I think he knows what he's doing with this kind of thing. And Unirock also has been deeply involved in critical thinking, the conspiracy theory movement, and sort of all aspects of the unexplained and mysteries. Big shout out to him as well. And he was kind of on it from a standpoint of, you're not making any sense. Come on the show and talk. Let's talk about it. And Uni's also been after some of the claims that Jordan Sather's made. And recently, with all of this, I think everyone's kind of looking at those that have been involved in the Corey Goode camp and are starting to say, okay, well, now that Gaia is not involved, are you going to join our community, or, where do you stand with us? Because a lot of the followers grew to trust these people. Right.
Who was Unirock? I'm not familiar with him at all. I've heard of
Unirock. Unirock is a military veteran who streams about 27 hours a day. He live streams. He's got the stream life going, and his channel is Unirock and then Unirock 2 on YouTube, and I believe it's at Unirock TV on Twitter.
Gotcha. Well, it's interesting when you were talking about kind of the conspiracy community. There are people like Goode in that community as well. Maybe with the UFOs they overlap, but there are people like, okay, is this guy really telling the truth, or what's the story, or is this a real legit, person? So I think that, but nothing like that where you've seen like outright trying to snatch some intellectual property that so many other people share. So I think that's kind of that is remarkable.
Yeah, and there is an issue with intellectual property within the Corey Goode accusations, and that is that there's this issue of other people, other experiencers saying that their stories were quite similar to the kinds of stories that Mr. Goode was saying, and there was some issues regarding Project Avalon, and who Corey was a member of, and there's interviews that currently exist on the internet, including one of Bill Ryan, who actually is the admin at Project Avalon, and they have apparently server records. There's a thread there, The Truth About Corey Goode, where it details out all the threads that Corey visited while he was a member. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I am a moderator at Project Avalon. However, this is my personal YouTube channel. But because I perform that role there privately, I just wanted, in the effort of disclosure, I just want to disclose, right?
Well, they said, I think it was Dolan in the interview that I saw, that there were significant records that he was there, something like 5,000 to 6,000 imprints. So he's reading or digging around on the message boards at Avalon from 2012 to 2015 and 16, and then all of a sudden he comes out with stories that maybe sounds pretty similar to other people who had been in these long discussions about these subjects. So it's pretty remarkable that they were able to go back and ping his ISP address and get all that.
Absolutely. And then just because I want to be complete about this, there's another message board as well. It's called The One Truth, and Corey Goode was a member there for a while, and there were some issues from what I understand, reading public, Google searches, there were issues with his membership there as well.
Interesting.
So
did anybody have any interaction with him in those era, in the 2012, 2015, before he really became a public figure? Does anybody ever talk about that, or
not that I recall. If anybody else is out there and you have had interactions with Corey Goode, please leave a comment down in the comment section down in our respective videos, so we can, get to the bottom of this, Williams or mine. But not that I know of.
I would be curious to see how his ideology or his persona developed before he went public. I think that would be fairly telling.
Yeah. He was a very kind of introverted, kind of flat affect kind of guy when his first episode, and over the course of time, I think he kind of got used to being in front of the camera. So he was a little bit different, and there was also the issue of some disability claims or something or other that people were wondering. Well, if you were doing these 19, I call them 19 and forwards now, because 20 and back is one of them trademark terms too, William.
Oh, explain that. I'm not familiar with that. So 20 to Mars and back or something?
20 out in space, 20 years out in space, and then back to Earth, back home. And it took about 15 minutes, and he did 3 of them to his own report. And so now I just call them 19 forward, because we're moving forward.
I mean, it's interesting, and that's really Dolan and some of these other guys just bring up the basic notion of credibility. There's no, they just keep saying the same thing. There's no verifiable secondary corroboration. We're in Blasey Ford territory, Kavanaugh. You really, and it's actually interesting because I think you can analogize the situation to Kavanaugh, because you had a legit Me Too movement. Tons of these men are abusing women, corporate America, entertainment, things like that. And all of a sudden it morphs into this kind of public thing at the Kavanaugh hearing with these very illegitimate characters. I said 3 or 4 weeks ago, I said that girl Sweatneck she's going to get criminally indicted. I could tell because her story's BS. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, Grassley, who was the head of the Judiciary Committee, said they have referred her case, and Avenatti, who's her attorney, who's in deep trouble, to the Department of Justice. So those were, those are unverifiable, uncorroborated. So these guys have unverifiable, uncorroborated stings. It's at a certain point, you have these kind of log rollers who will go along with their story, but there really is a lack of proof. And I was just thinking about that, how these people can kind of get away with this. It's pretty remarkable.
It is. And you bring up a great point, if I can just riff off of that, because we need to know when we're talking about these kinds of issues, whether it's, here in this 3-dimensional reality in a federal court, somebody's testifying, we need to know who these people are, right? That's how we establish trust. You are who you say you are, and Corey Goode, when he first came on the scene, people were like, well, who is this guy? Right. Show us your DD-214 for starters, because you said you were in the military. Right. Do a polygraph test, do a regression. And he wasn't comfortable doing any of those things. That's fine. But then don't try to say that you are the only person that is allowed to speak about these experiences and give that testimony using the same language, because logically, if these programs exist and there's thousands of people in them,
right? The My Labs or whatever he supposedly grew up in, with
Correct.
picking him up and taking him off to places. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like there should be many people having similar stories, not just from one person.
Right. Or like
Right.
he can reference important people that he met who are running this, or something that can be verified, right? This guy worked for, or at least know really deep, deep state information or something like that. Like give some specifics. I mean,
Right. We know from his own report that he worked for, information technologies, some kind of a specialist with computers. He changed servers and, somebody said he might have worked for InfraGard. I haven't seen his CV, but you never know. But it wasn't like Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy now, was it?
No, but we can talk about that next. We need to cover some updated information about that as well.
Okay.
There's like a real lack of background information, and I do believe that there is actually a credible core of discussion about ufology. There are people, the stories people are witnessing. There's similar stories people come up with about these, communications with these things that they couldn't have figured it out and talked among themselves pre-internet. So I do think something's there, but then it's just like somebody infiltrating the Me Too movement or conspiracy, and then somebody sees an opportunity. It's like, where's the verification, man? You got to say something, So,
show me the evidence.
Show me the evidence. Show me something. You're in Basaggio territory where even when you look into the evidence, it's not credible. Like,
right.
I live very close to where he supposedly took a space jump from El Segundo right literally south of LAX. It's literally 1 block south that he took supposedly to space with, and fought pterodactyls or whatever, plesiosaurus or something. And I've lived here in this area, South Bay, for like 17 years. It's clearly just an office building. So 999 Boulevard Boulevard. It's not possible. And there was no other building there before that. I mean, it's just not. You have to think that they built some space jump thing there and then tore it down and rebuilt an office building. I was talking to somebody in an interview last week. I drive by there and look in. They just look like miserable office workers. They have glass windows, which makes it less plausible that there's some kind of secret space thing going on. But I drive by there and it's like, these are just standard office hacks who work at insurance companies and stuff, man. This is not a military building.
Well, and Basaggio loses credibility as an aside because he took pictures from the Mars rovers and did this kind of like hyper blow-ups of a little patch of sand and said, "Oh, this is a slag pit of bodies."
I didn't
totally. Whoa!
It was interesting because there's a good podcast about cults, and there was one guy about the Raelian. He was a Raelian cult leader. It was actually French, and he would just do the most ridiculous stuff on these public stunts. But people who keyed into him knew that there was just 1 out of 100 people that would believe him. And that's all he was looking for. 1 out of 100. So he would go on, and most people would go, this guy's a kook. He's dressed in weird outfits. He has a weird symbol. But he had been such a successful, scam. If you looked at the guy, I forgot his name. It's like Jacques something. But he had been like a hustler his whole life. So he just found a really good hustle where he can make tons of money. Really interesting. The Raelian cult and the guy, the leader, was really fascinating. Like people said that they could tell that it was so brazen. He was laughing at himself while he's telling his story about UFOs and communicating.
Wow.
You could analogize this whole situation to the Raelian cult in a way. I think that there's overlapping things. So it's another interesting thing to look into. But we've got about 10, 15 minutes left. There was some updates with the To the Stars Academy that came out, which was a filing with, I think, the SEC about how much debt or how much stock they really gave out. It's apportioned as debt, but it's basically $36 million worth of stock in a company that's valueless as they've given out to all these people in the hopes that they can generate enough money to, have these options eventually vest with something. So, I mean, it's pretty incredible. It
is. And this coming from an organization that, I mean, when they first did their big unveil over a year ago now, I thought that this is how, if there's going to be disclosure, then gosh darn it, it's going to come from ex-government spooks coming out of there and saying this is what we're going to do. And I had my hopes up, and then I started looking into the background right off their own website, for crying out loud. And every single person other than Tom DeLonge in that roster, CIA Commendation Medal, counterintelligence, DOD, NSA, that, brain mechanics and things. And so I began to wonder, and I do hope something comes out of it. However, and I said this on another stream, it costs over $100 million to build this stealth aircraft. So how are they going to build a UFO for a lot less?
I don't have any idea.
Yeah,
it just there's another, if you apply your dictum of reason, logic, and common sense, it's like, where is any of that? This there's no common sense. How are you going to build this? They had such, it's kind of like the .com enthusiasm 20 years ago, like, we're going to just take over the world, It's like, well, where are you going to get the money and how are you going to do it? So, that's $36 million in stock. So they have a lot of people banking on this company better be successful, because I'm going to gravy train. I'm going to get on the gravy train once I sell my stock. Once this becomes a hope, that means they're hoping for it to become a public company.
Correct. And the other thing with that is that I don't know how these startups work. I mean, I'm just down here on the farm, right? So I don't get all the highfalutin economics and everything, but I'm reassured by people that have invested in them that this is perfectly normal. It's perfectly natural to have this much amount of debt for a startup, and I respect their authority on that. One of the officers left. Or actually one of the members, Gary Nolan from Stanford University, who does a lot of great genetic work with cancer. He's disassociated himself, but can still consult. And then somebody else, I think it was Jim Semivan, became the VP. And so there's been a little bit of restructuring.
Interesting.
And I'm just wondering, where's this thing going to go? Because they're funding it also by T-shirt sales, record sales, book sales from Lavenda.
Right. Well, I think they just came up with the second volume of Secret Machines. I was looking at Tom DeLonge's Twitter, and so I don't know how a book sale is going to justify this massive stock offering where all these people are going to supposedly cash out. I don't know where the revenue is going to be. You kind of have to have actual revenues. And these SEC filings are really amazing because you can see the bottom line of what's going on at the company, And I don't know. I mean, he's got to be sweating, and his investors have got to be sweating. What I really need to see with those SEC filings, which I haven't seen, is actually with their real revenues and how much money they've raised. That's fascinating.
So I'll send you the link on that. But the other thing that's recently come out regarding the SEC filings and that huge number that's really hard to ignore for a lot of just common folk using common sense is Tom DeLonge came out recently and just said that essentially it was a lie.
Said that the $36.1 million in debt was a lie?
Yeah.
Really?
Now if that's true, he is on public record stating that a company that is associated with his name lied on the SEC filing.
Oh my God, that's incredible. Well, you can get sued. I mean, they're going after Elon Musk for all kinds of misstatements, public misstatements and things like that. And that guy's like a titan of American business. He's in deep trouble with Tesla. DeLonge might get in trouble making statements like that. If you try just simple fraud on those SEC filings, get you a criminal complaint.
Sure. I mean, look at what happened to Elon Musk. He suggested in a tweet that possibly the company might go private, and you see what happened there.
Yeah.
He smoked a little marijuana on the Joe Rogan podcast. Hi, Joe Rogan. And you know, his investors were like, "What?
Dude, they're
What's going
saying
on
that
with
guy's
it?"
going to bars and getting hammered and hanging out with that girl who like sacrifices chickens in her closet. What was that African American rapper? Do you know who I'm talking about?
No, I don't follow
Okay,
much.
well,
Yeah.
supposedly he was hanging out with her, and she took some pictures, and his lawyers tried to get her phone back so they could wipe it, and they could wipe it clean and give it back to her because she had incriminating photos about Musk. But her name is, I can't remember her name.
Unreal.
She was saying she was sacrificing chickens in her closet, flat out said it, hanging out with Elon Musk. So it was a big mistake. And they actually lost a huge contract within the last month with the American government and went to another person that they should have won. And so it's not looking good for Musk at Tesla. And I think he's left Tesla. I don't think he's there anymore, but Tesla and SpaceX. So.
Is that right? Yeah, I tell you, folks, when you look at, you know, history, I mean, the U.S. government doesn't have a really good relationship, past tense, with Tesla, Nikola Tesla.
That's right.
Right? And so now we're seeing the same pattern repeat itself with a company. What's really going on behind the scenes is what I wonder.
That's another good question. Interesting they bring it up because there was a really good dark journalist study that he did online about Tesla and how Trump's uncle was the guy who was responsible for looking over Tesla's documents after he died or something like that. Really fascinating.
That's right. Yeah, there's all kinds of interconnections here with a number of these families, which is fascinating in and of itself.
Well, he did some really, I mean, for me, it's because I've been kind of inquiring into the occult for the last 5 or 10 years. So many of those families that started off the technology companies were involved in Helena Blavatsky's stuff or all kinds of really fascinating. Like, and I grew up in Northern California, so when a dark journalist was saying things like Varian, I was like, oh, I remember Varian. I used to drive by the Varian offices. The Varian brothers were doing Blavatsky stuff. What? So it's pretty stuff. So yeah, but we're kind of coming down to the end.
Okay.
So maybe you can tell people where they can kind of get an update on all of these kind of Corey Goode updates.
So if anybody's interested in kind of following what I call the AB paranormal, which is a wide range of different things, not only the kind of entertainment-based secret space insiders, whistleblowers, and all that, but also real secret space program research, looking into FOIA requests on all areas of conspiracy theory, secret government experiments, as well as unexplained phenomenon, unexplained disappearances. You can check out my YouTube channel, Joe from the Carolinas, here at youtube.com. You can also check out my website, joefromthecarolinas.com. We're at Joe from Carolina on Twitter. And of course, you could also choose to support me on patreon.com.
And people check out the Twitter feeds on Joe's Twitter and see all of these different communications. There's just such a list. If you want to follow up this whole Goode fiasco, you can check it out. But I can tell you one thing about the secret space program that's legit. I grew up in Northern California and knew somebody who made specialty plastic parts. And back then, before kind of computers in the 80s, there were still rudimentary computers. Before AutoCAD, super complex, but doing them for the government. And he was putting together, you know, secret satellites back in the 80s and early 90s that, you know, were military satellites. They were space satellites. I don't want to give away all the details, but
we would love to hear them.
Well, maybe offline, but they're very advanced. The United States weaponry, that's extremely advanced.
And doing some of the
weaponry, like, but really,
doing some of the Freedom of Information Act stuff we've been uncovering, there is a lot there. Yeah, there is a lot there.
So, like when Trump came out and announced the Space Force, it's like, okay, sure. Yeah, you just started.
Right. Let's get it funded first. So
yeah, go check out Joe's stuff. Go to YouTube, subscribe on his YouTube channel. There's so much great information there too about so many of those different subjects. I highly recommend that. So Joe from the Carolinas, thank you very much for being on the show.
It's my pleasure to be with you, William, and big shout out to all your listeners and viewers.
Cool, man. Take care. Have a good day.
You too.
Going to another meeting.
Take care.
All right, you too.